For a lot of caregivers and nurses, the words self-care can feel like salt in an open wound. You're already stretched, exhausted, charting late, answering calls at all hours, holding space for everyone's pain. And then you're told to fill up your cup. With bubble baths and long walks you simply don't have time for. Maybe you've tried to take a break and immediately felt guilty. Maybe you've thought other people have it worse. Or I chose this role, so I should just cope. Or you've watched someone you love who gave everything to others quietly run themselves into the ground. If that's you, our conversation is for you if you're caring for patients, family, or both, and your own needs are always last. You feel like you don't have time for self-care and you need simple, real-life ways to lower your stress without dropping the people you're caring for. My guest is Jenny Lytle, RN, a nurse with over 30 years experience, much of that in hospice and end-of-life care. When her mum, also a nurse, died unexpectedly, Jenny realised just how many caregivers prioritise everyone else at the expense of their own health. That loss led her to create the Becoming Method, a practical framework for personalised self-care, and to write her book, Self-Care Isn't Selfish, the Compassionate Nurse's Step-by-Step Guide to Personalised Stress Relief. She now helps nurses and caregivers build simple, sustainable stress relief practices that fit into already full lives. Today, we're talking about what it really means to say self-care isn't selfish, how to start when you have no time or energy, and how caring for yourself can actually be the most selfless thing you can do. Jenny, welcome to Radiant Moments.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity, Michelle.
I've been looking forward to our conversation for quite some time. Jenny, before we get started, I'd love to begin with your story because it explains so much about why you do this work now. For our listeners meeting you for the very first time, can you share a bit about your nursing journey and the kind of work you were doing before everything shifted?
I've been a nurse for 31 years now, and I started out in long-term care. I worked in a nursing home for a couple of years. And I remember then, I enjoyed the work, but there weren't enough hours in the day. And that was 30 years ago. And it's even more that way now with the way things are. I remember working, and when I got out of nursing school, because I had worked almost full time through nursing school and went to school, and I thought, gosh, when I get out of school, I'm going to have all this extra time. Then when I started working, I realized, you know what? I don't feel like I have all this extra time because I had to work over part of the time, or because it was heavy work mentally, physically, emotionally. And that's something that kind of carries over. And I came from a mother who did not have good boundaries. She had worked, 2 and 3 jobs while she was raising me. And then we went to nursing school together when I graduated from high school. And she was someone who gave and gave and gave to everybody else. And I realized that, okay, this part of nursing maybe isn't for me. And so I did some other things, and I stayed home a little while when my kids were small. And then I kind of fell into hospice work. I had a friend whose father was sent home on hospice from the ER. They knew that he had cancer. He was going through treatment, thought that everything was kind of going to be okay. And then he woke up one morning and things had changed, went to the emergency room, and the doctor said, "You've got about 2 weeks left to live," and sent him home on hospice. And that was kind of my introduction to that. I had known of hospice, but I didn't really understand what it was. And so I kind of stayed there with them for the majority of that 2 weeks. And I loved that the hospice team, they came in and they made sure that he had the medications that he needed to keep him comfortable. And he was able to be there at home with everybody surrounding him and in his comfortable chair and go out on the porch and smoke. And because what difference does it make at that point? And it was something that I thought, wow, this is really cool. This is like a different side of healthcare, being able to be with people one-on-one and have them in their homes. And that was something that really spoke to me. And so he did pass right around that 2-week mark. And a couple of months later, I thought, okay, I was still feeling that. And so I applied at that hospice and got hired. And that was the first time I'd ever really loved my job. And I ended up doing a lot of different roles in that company, and most of them I loved, but I also worked a lot. I said yes a lot because, well, somebody has to do it. And what I didn't realize is the other people don't do it because they have good boundaries and they know when to say no. And I ended up incredibly burnout. And my mom passed away suddenly. And that, I believe, was because she did have chronic illnesses. She had health challenges. She wasn't completely healthy and then it just happened. But I think those things also were a result of her neglecting her own needs for so long. And that coupled with my own burnout, I realized like, wow, this is the more nurses and caregivers that I talk to, I realized how common that is because like you said, we feel like we don't have time to take care of ourselves or we're being selfish or we don't have the energy to fit those things in. And so that's something that's really made me passionate about that is understanding that it doesn't have to feel like another full-time job to take care of your own needs. And it doesn't mean that you're selfish. It doesn't mean that you are neglecting other people. It just means that you're filling your own cup so that you can continue to care for other people.
And I think that's really valuable is to understand that if you don't take care of yourself and you fall down, there is nobody else that's going to pick up and do the same level and the same amount that you are. Because it's hard to step into a role you were not planning on. It's hard to step into a role that somebody else has been doing, and there is no groundwork or support for that. And I think that if we can create this education pathway, that self-care isn't something that is optional. It is a non-negotiable life requirement to find balance and maintain good health. And with saying that, I know that you've written this book, Self-Care Isn't Selfish. How do you see it as different from many other self-care books and checklists out there?
I think really one of the things is that it's just a little book. It's a short, easy read. And I did that because I am highly distractible. And like most people who need books on self-care, it's like, well, yeah, I really need that. I don't have time for that. So the point was to make it very easy to read, whether you want to sit down and read it all in 2 hours, or whether it's okay, I have like 5 minutes that I can focus on this of a morning and go through a chapter at a time. Then the chapters are really short, making it easy to, stop and start because I know that the people who really need to read it are the ones who don't have a lot of extra time. And, it tells my story, but it's also just very practical and not everything is going to be for everybody. And that's my whole approach to it is that self-care isn't selfish, but it also needs to be personalized. Because the things that fill my cup might be completely different than the things that fill yours. And taking time to figure out what are those things, because a lot of times we don't know. It's, well, what would you do if you had a day to yourself? Well, I'd sleep, right? Or I'd go take care of somebody. But those are kind of the two super common answers. If you had an hour to yourself, what would help you feel better, more replenished, more rejuvenated? And a lot of times people don't know. And when you have that free time, or when you're in a situation where you're super stressed and you think, I don't know what to do right now, like I'm right at the end of my rope, neither one of those times are the times to figure out what's going to make me feel better. You need to have that in place ahead of time. I want it to be something that's kind of a working care plan. Like what is it that I need to take care of myself? And then practical ways to have those things. It's not all spa days and bubble baths and beach vacations, but maybe that is something. If I go and I just sit in the tub and I have a candle going and maybe my favorite bath salts, then that's something that helps me feel better. If those things aren't readily available, then it's like, I'm too tired to even do that right now. So maybe I'll do it later. But if okay, here's where I keep these things and they're right here together. It's easy. I can just go in there and do that at a moment's notice. And so that's one of the things that I do is I encourage people to have a happy basket where you have the things that you enjoy. Maybe it's a crossword book or a devotional that you like or a magazine. Those little things that you don't always take the time for, or some fuzzy socks and a candle, but you just have them right there where I need to show myself a little love. Then that's an easy way to be able to do it.
I think when you say self-care isn't selfish, but a lack of self-care can be.
Mm-hmm.
If you were talking to a caregiver who feels instantly guilty about putting their needs anywhere near the top of the list, could you unpack what you mean by self-care isn't selfish, but a lack of self-care can be?
Yes. So I'm probably going to get choked up. My mom was somebody who would do anything for anybody except herself. I understand more why she did what she did. I mean, that's how she loved people. And I understand that. But in her taking care of everybody but herself, she took my mom from me. And I feel like she did what she felt like she needed to do. And she did a great job and she helped a lot of people. But if she would have taken just some time to take care of herself, then I feel like she might still be here. And she died from a ruptured aneurysm that we knew she had. And she was going to get it taken care of. At first, she wasn't sure what to do because it was in like a risky part. And she was kind of nervous about that. But then when she had decided, okay, I'm going to go ahead with the surgery, but first I want to get these other things done. And there wasn't time for that. But she also had some chronic illnesses that I believe were at least in part related to her just working exhausted all the time, burning the candle at both ends. I mean, having a lot of unresolved anger and grief and sadness. And that's where I'm coming from. When we want to keep caring for everybody but ourselves, then the big risk is that we're not going to be around to help those people that we feel like we're supposed to be helping. And it sounds dramatic when we don't take care of ourselves, when we don't get enough sleep, when we don't do those basic kind of things, eventually it's going to weigh you down and it's going to have an impact.
I really appreciate how you're linking this is not just comfort, but to our ability to keep caring without collapsing. As a caregiver myself, as you're talking about, when you push and you're up at all hours, especially when you're caring for someone and they're in hospital, it's a 24-hour job. You don't get sleep. Sometimes I had both of my children in hospital, and if you weren't up with one, you were up with the other, or the nurses were coming in. And because you're the only person there, going out for a break and having a cuppa or even something to eat, sometimes in a crisis mode, that doesn't happen. And so when you look at that over an extended period of time, because when you're saying before that it sounds dramatic, it does if you look at it in this moment right now. But when you look at it over the long term of the investment of caring for another soul, caring for more than one soul, if you're doing that day in, day out for years, that catches up with you. And if you ignore the headaches or, the nausea, the feeling exhausted, the brain fog, like if you ignore all of those tiny whispers that your body's like, hey, hi, you're ignoring me, hello, and you just keep going, no, it's fine. And you just keep trying to dig more out of a cup that is already bottomless. At some point, the body is going to say, well, now you have to stop. Like right this second, you've got nothing. And I have experienced just that. And so when you're talking about the reality of the impact that would have if you weren't here and having to take that stop to care for yourself and your recovery, and then recognizing that my ways have to change, you have to stop and reevaluate what your capacity is so that the harm because it is harm to yourself when you're ignoring the basic things because you're giving it to somebody else, that slowly has an impact over time. And so I can, hand on heart, say it's not dramatic. It is a reality for caregivers. I hear a lot of women and some men who are burnt out, who go to work, who come home, who do the caring and the medications and the hospital runs and all of those things. And everybody says, I don't have time. And those moments of taking 5 minutes, putting them on while you're habit stacking so that you're giving yourself some soothing whilst doing other things, I think is really important. And I know from this process and the loss of your mum that you've created the becoming method so that self-care becomes something personal and realistic, not another impossible standard to uphold yourself to. What is the becoming method? And could you walk us through the core pieces in simple terms?
Sure. I agree completely with what you're saying about the way the body speaks to us. And I talk a lot about that too. Our body, it gives us these signals and then it keeps getting a little louder, and we can only ignore it for so long. And then we get that big, bam, it's time to listen. And some people get that call in a very unpleasant way. And some people, the reality is, get that big bam and that's it. There's not another chance. And that's one of the things that I try to talk to people about is, especially for those who are caring for, maybe they're the sole caregiver, like you with your boys, and you've got these people really depending on you. And so me, yes, I'm a nurse. I'm able to leave my work. Sometimes it feels like I'm not, but I am. But I have other people depending on me, but not in a 24/7, like I legitimately am responsible for taking care of these people's needs around the clock. But that's when I just push back gently and very lovingly. And if you are all that they've got, then what if you're not here? And it's just a reframing because we think that we'll get around to things. And so on to your question about the becoming method. So when I started my company, I named it Becoming Your Best with Jenny Lytle RN. And I did that because I feel like we're all works in progress. I'm never going to reach what I want to be. I'm never going to have everything where I'm like, well, yep, nothing needs to improve. And I think that it's a personal journey. And that's why it's becoming your best, because my best is different than your best. We're living two different lives. And so when I thought, I want to have a systematic framework to help people be able to work through this more quickly and easily than I did. Because for me, it was a couple year process, and I spent a lot of time and a lot of money trying to figure out, like, how do I not feel like this? How do I not get into this mess all the time? and so I looked at the nursing process because I'm a nurse, and I put it together from that. And so each letter starts with like the B is baseline. And so that's starting with where are you? And so the overarching idea is where are you now? Where do you want to go? And how are you going to get there? And so it's really taking time to look at where am I right now in terms of self-care and life satisfaction, and really just breaking that down. And all of these things, they're pieces that you can go really deep into, but that's also not really necessary. You can work through each section in a pretty short period of time using my framework. And then it's the things that excite you, and the things that give you confidence, the things that you've done well, because we can focus so much, especially when you're someone who is in a caregiving role. We focus on those things that we don't do right. Those I should have done this instead. And hindsight is 2020, and we're never going to be able to meet every need exactly right at the right time, but we really beat ourselves up about that. And so part of it is definitely some mindset work to think about what are the things that you're doing well. And then if there's things that you do well consistently, how can you kind of pull some of that knowledge, or maybe some of those tricks and routines that you have built in around those, to move them into fitting in some time for yourself. And then the M is meaning, looking at what makes your life feel meaningful. What are the things that really matter most to you? And those are things also that we just kind of take for granted. We don't think about what is it that really fills me up. Then just moving into the rest of it, it's just getting more practical with those things that are going to have the biggest impact on me. Because again, like I said, my things are going to be different than your things. There may be some overlap there, and there's some, things like deep breathing and, getting enough sleep. Yeah, those apply to all of us. The getting enough sleep, of course, is easier said than done for some people. So trying to figure out ways to work around those, and pulling all of that together and putting that plan in place, so that, like we talked a bit about, so that you have that ready to go when you really need it. And you can start when everything's kind of a same old, same old. Maybe it's the same pressure that you're used to dealing with, and you can start integrating some of those things. But also when things are not going well at all, when everything's kind of collapsing, and you can go, okay, I'm just going to come back to these really basic couple of things that are going to help get me through this. I'm not really looking to thrive right now. I'm just looking to survive, and maybe get that little 1-inch margin of, hey, I can go another day. Because sometimes for caregivers, it's just having that little bit of strength to just get through the next day, the next day, the next day.
Especially when it's heavy.
Absolutely.
Sometimes, especially in crisis moments, it is that putting one foot in front of the other. I feel like in those crisis moments, as caregivers, especially of little people, our responsibility is a little higher to contain all of our emotions, so that they don't feel worried, so that they're not scared if something is not going according to plan. Being able to remain the same happy, consistent person in the room, and then being able to find a moment where then you can fall apart, and then you have to put yourself back together to go back in. So there's these micro moments where you get a release of all of that built up emotion, because you don't want to terrify. You don't want to make them feel uneasy. You don't want them to be worried that they're not in good hands. So I think you're right. Sometimes you need those little skills, those little micro moments, to just help you to stay afloat when that's happening. And I think also for many listeners, they may be thinking, I don't know where to start. I don't have
Mhm.
time or energy to take care of myself. How does your method help someone in that exact place to get started today?
So not only just using my method period, that's something that, yes, is a way to kind of be able to work through those things quickly. But somebody who is just starting out and they're saying, I can't even imagine having time for something like that. And if that's the case, I hear you. And so for that person, I would suggest finding maybe 30 seconds to 1 minute, whether that's in your car when you're driving or when you get home or when you get to work or when you stop. Take that 30 seconds to 1 minute and just breathe and just try to focus on, breathing in a little slower and breathing out a little slower than you normally would, a little deeper, and just give yourself that 1 minute to just really focus on you. And, if you can fit in 2 minutes, that's super awesome. But sometimes it's in the bathroom, whether that's at work or that's at home. If you have that time where you're in there, take that extra minute to breathe. If you're feeling, like super anxious, super frustrated, and maybe kind of shaking it off like a dog does when everything's all pinned up, they get where everything is like really heightened and then they shake it off. And we don't do that often, but if you try it, you feel really weird, but it really helps to reset your nervous system and give yourself just that little bit of space. And I know for some people, the bathroom may be the only place you get time alone. And if you're caring for a family member or especially little ones, you may not even get that. But you just those little bits of time that start very small, because it's going to feel overwhelming at first. You're going to think, I don't have time for this. But if you're like up here all the time with this just anxiety and tension and heaviness, if you can just get it down just a little touch, then you can incorporate a little bit more often and then start moving into other things. It's unrealistic to think that somebody who is giving of themselves all day, every day is all of a sudden going to sit down and go, okay, I'm going to take an hour for myself every day. That's not realistic in a lot of people's lives, and especially not in their minds from the beginning. Even the people who possibly could have that time are not going to feel like they do. So starting very small, giving yourself lots of grace, because it's not an all or nothing thing. Maybe you do that a couple times a day and then you have 2 days where you think, I didn't even think about it. I can't do that either. Then just come back to it again. You don't have to have a perfect streak. It's okay to just do the things when you remember. And I have some people, and I set reminders too on my phone to remind myself, breathe or get up and stretch. Well, I've been having to do some of that because I can't just sit for hours and hours and push through like I did, because then I realized that it really gets my pain aggravated. The things that I am a proponent of, they're not rocket science. They're not things that most people haven't heard. It's just putting them together in a little bit of a different way and giving yourself permission to take that little bit of time for yourself and kind of a mindset shift on why it's so important.
I think leading on from that, there are caregivers or carers who do live it all or nothing headspace. I'm either in this and there's nothing else and I can't do it, or they're doing the opposite. They're either overhaul everything or there's no point. What would you offer as a more compassionate way about thinking about self-care?
First, I completely identify with that. My normal default is all or nothing. I'm all in or I'm all out. But I have learned to get a little more relaxed with that. But that has been my norm. For those who are kind of feeling that way, I look at it as like, what would you say to a friend? So if you were talking to a friend who said, you know what, I don't have time for this. I tried to fit in a little bit of time for me and I didn't even know what to do. Or maybe I did it this one time and then, now there's just not time and I don't find that, that I'm really able to do that. I feel guilty about it. And so that's just something else that I feel like I'm failing at. In that situation, because we have all of this negative talk all these things that we say to ourselves, and especially when we're under a lot of stress, then that makes it even more so. And I will often ask my client, what if this was your good friend or your child that was saying this to you? What would you say to them? Would you say, yeah, you're right. I don't know why you even tried, or, well, it's what you get for trying to be selfish. And yes, that's kind of over the top, but at the same time, it does make people stop and think, because of course I'm not going to say that to them. And I'm like, well, what would you say? well, I guess I'd say that you're just starting to do this, and it's not going to feel comfortable at first, but good job. And so it's those things, it's those ways of reprogramming the way that we think, instead of having just that default negativity and guilt kind of creeping up, and instead realizing that it's something new, and it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable, and it's not going to necessarily just happen on autopilot. It's something that we really need to just keep coming back to.
And having that realization that generally it takes 30 to 90 days for a new habit to become something that's automatic. And so if you look at it as it's years worth of caregiving, 90 days out of those years that you've been doing it is really not a massive time investment. And I really love how you're talking about self-care in small, doable tweaks rather than this whole complete life renovation that people sometimes feel like, because they're like, oh yeah, just go have a day at the spa. Why don't you go for a walk for an hour? Or, take a weekend away. And when people say that, I cringe a little bit, because I'm like, are you aware of the logistics that is required? If I was to go away for a weekend, I was talking to one of my family who wants to go overseas, and thinking about when you have somebody who you care for who are on feeds, enteral feeds, or they're on blood products because they've got no immune system or anything like that. The logistics to go away overseas for any length of time. Okay, I'm going to need this many bags of formula, and how do I transport? I need a mid transport from here to over there, so that when I get to my next destination, there's another one, because carrying that load, and people don't think about, okay, how many bags am I going to need? What is the weight that I require? How do I get additional supplies? Where are hospitals along the route that I'm going in case there is a medical emergency? The level of commitment just to do that, and for them to come with you. Not for you to go on your own, but for any type of mini adventure that they would need to go on if we were to go away somewhere. That is overwhelming for some people. And some carers never go away just for that reason. I was listening to Julie Bath. I interviewed her a fortnight ago, and she was talking about the same thing. When you have this disconnect from the friends that you had before you became a carer, because they don't understand. They're like, oh, you came, that's fantastic. But they don't understand that then I needed 7 pieces of equipment, 3 nappy bags. I needed all of these things just to make it to the car. And so by then, I don't want to go anymore. I'm exhausted. And those, as you said, the negative talk that comes into play, I forgot this, or I left this behind. And it's not like you recognize that you've left it behind and then you let it go. That comes back across the day. How could you do this every day, And I think framing it in doable, small moments is such a beautiful thing for caregivers to breathe in. That I can do this whilst I make myself a coffee. I can do this when I sit in the car before I get out to go to my next appointment. It's such an emotional side of even contemplating self-care. So I want to talk a little bit about that emotional side, because the weight caregivers carry isn't just physical or logistical, it's deeply emotional and spiritual too. And I want to look at how can caregivers maintain their emotional strength and well-being while supporting others through really hard seasons.
I think for that, again, it is kind of individualized, but I also think there's some commonality. So it's taking time to reflect on what it is that brings you joy, that brings you peace. For me, my faith is very important to me. And I know that there are things that I can do that make my days feel better, that make things feel less heavy and make me feel more connected to Him and less alone. And so for me, that starts with, I get up and have 4 devotional books that I go through on a perfect day that I go through, and I do the daily reading for those, and I do some journaling. That doesn't happen every day in a perfect world, but it's those little things that that do bring me peace, that do bring me joy. I also like nature is a great way for me to like nurture myself, body, mind, and spirit. I love being in nature, whether it's going outside and just smelling the fresh air or looking around and seeing, all of the trees and sometimes flowers. Right now, it's just all kind of gloomy here. It's winter. But those things really help me to feel more calm and secure. And that helps me to be able to show up better for other people. And sometimes taking part in those things with the people that we care about, having things that we can do together that may be super simple, like maybe going for a short walk, or if that's not a possibility, even being, inside, but looking out at something together, having kind of some of those shared experiences in ways that really, really matter to us. And also giving those that we're caring for kind of that space and that permission to figure out those things for themselves too, and what it is that helps them to feel calmer and more peaceful. And definitely when we're in a better space, when we feel more at peace ourselves, that has an absolute impact on everyone that we're around. When you're around somebody that's super high strung and edgy, you feel that too. And being able to to be that kind of calm presence for those that we're caring for as much as possible. And again, it's not going to be all the time because we're human, and we all get a little fed up, overwhelmed. It doesn't mean you don't love somebody. It doesn't mean that you care. It just means that you're carrying a lot of stuff. And sometimes it just kind of explodes, and having some grace with yourself when that happens, because it's human nature.
100%. And I connect very much with nature. And during my own personal medical journey, I found not being able to get out really made me feel more lethargic, because with our loved ones, we try to take them out in nature, even if that's just to drive around if we can't get out, or to sit on a picnic blanket and just be out in the air. But we really try and create spaces at home as well, like our backyard, where we have different flowers and we have some fresh fruit that we like to grow. We also find that our loved ones, we invest in blue and green therapy for our loved ones that struggle with depression and anxiety, where we connect with a body of water and somewhere green. And that doesn't mean going for a swim or just immersing. Sometimes that we just sit there and chat. It's just having that outdoor connection. And I think that that's really important, that it doesn't have to be on a walk, that it can be in your house with a house plant, or just looking out from your hospital window to a garden. And I've found in more recent times, as they're making new hospitals, they make dedicated outdoor greenery and indoor greenery spaces for patients, because there's lots of research behind it where it shows recovery is made faster with a connection to greenery, outdoors, nature. So I really value, and I am so with you in that experience. And you mentioned that there are 2 questions you ask yourself when you're feeling overwhelmed and unsure. What are those questions, and how can listeners use them when everything feels just a little bit too much?
Yeah. The first one is when I'm trying to figure things out, when it feels like I've got, so many things competing for my attention, like most of us do most of the time. Is this getting me closer to my goals? And my goals, that doesn't mean necessarily I'm, trying to take over the world. It doesn't have to be these big things. Maybe my goals are to feel less stressed, are to quit feeling snippy when somebody asks me for something extra. So whatever that goal looks like, the answer to that can be yes or no. It's just kind of a check-in with, is this something that I really want to be spending time doing right now? Is it getting me closer to my goals? And maybe it's like, no, it's not, but it's still what I want to do. But it's kind of a little buffer. And the other one I use a lot of the time, again, especially when I'm feeling overwhelmed. And just full disclosure, it doesn't matter if you can work through my framework, you can use the becoming method perfectly. Life still is not going to be perfect. There's still going to be times where you're like, no, I'm at the end of my rope. I don't even know what to do. And I still do that. The difference is now I can go, no, I do know what to do. I just need to take a few deep breaths and bring it back to basics. But I'm able to turn things around much quicker. But I still do a lot of the same things that a lot of the people that I'm working with do. I just don't do them as long. The second question that I ask is, what do I need most right now? And I have that pop up on my phone as a reminder, because sometimes I do a lot of computer work right now with my day job. And sometimes what I need most right now is to keep pushing through and finish doing this thing. But a lot of times what I need to do most is get up and move around for a minute, not sit here for 3 hours with my neck, my shoulders up around my ears because I've been typing. Or maybe I need to go to the bathroom. Maybe I need to get something to drink because I've been sitting here dehydrated. So that it's so important for us to just kind of check in with ourselves. And especially when you're in the midst of caring for people, just stopping and thinking, okay, like what do I need most right now? Because maybe you do need to eat. Like you said, there's times when you don't eat and you just go all this time without that. And then you kind of binge on things that maybe aren't super great choices. And then you feel bad and sluggish. And then you kind of beat yourself up because, oh, you did it again. And so you get that vicious cycle going again. So that's just something that I find very helpful, especially when I've got a bunch of things that all need my attention. They all seem important. And I feel almost paralyzed by not knowing exactly what to do. I had a situation a few months ago where it was like that. And I thought there's so much right now. There's so much that I need to do. I don't know where to start. I closed my eyes and I had like instrumental music going on, some spa kind of music. And I don't always get all into it like that, but I did. And so I had that going and I just kind of kept asking myself, what do I need most right now? And in my frustration, I don't know. That's what I just kept thinking and kept saying. And I was asking myself out loud. And after I did that about 6 or 7 times, then it was like very clear to me. That's kind of an obvious first step, but it was not obvious to me until I really dug into it, because we get so full of the decisions that we have to make and all of the things that we have to do. And we can lose sight of the basic things.
Yes. And I like that. What do I need right now? And even just that pause to think. And sometimes in chaos, I don't know what I need. And it just gives you that moment to go and check in with your body. Close your eyes.
Right.
What do I need right now? I need to step out of the room. Your body and your mind is acutely aware of what you need if you give it the moment to pause and answer. And that practice is best completed in calm situations, so that in chaotic situations, it is second nature and you can just, what do I need? And I love that you said having it as a reminder on your phone, because if you are in a chaotic moment, crisis hits, that simple reminder coming up on your phone, okay, what do I need right now? I need to eat a biscuit before I fall over. I need to step outside and breathe before I lose my nana. And I really think when you're looking at the why and the mindset, I love bringing it down to earth for people who are listening on their commute late at night and they're already exhausted. And that happens a lot where you're running in between appointments. You've been up since 4 or 5 in the morning because you had to prepare everything for back-to-back appointments, snacks, medication, all of those things. And I'm adding a caveat to my phone that says, what do I need right now? I'm going to take that. I'm going to add that to my repertoire, because when you're busy and everything is stacked, it's the last thing you think about. And I think that's a gentle reminder just for yourself. What would be the most important message you would want to share with caregivers who feel utterly drained but still love the people they're caring for deeply?
The work you do is something that you are uniquely equipped to do. That doesn't mean that it's easy. And I'm sure a lot of times you feel very unseen and misunderstood. But what you're doing, it matters more than anything else, really. I mean, you're caring for people, but you're people too. And being able to fit in those little bits of time for you, ways for you to be able to continue to show up and care for those people is so important. And it's not necessarily easy, but I also believe it's not maybe as hard as you think it's going to be. Just be kind to yourself. Start small and be kind to yourself.
I love the simplicity of that message, and it lands. If you could offer one simple daily mantra, practice, or a sentence for caregivers to hold on to when they're tempted to take themselves past that point of empty, what would it be?
It kind of boils down to 2 things, and that's who's taking care of you and who's going to care for them if you can't. Because most of the time as caregivers, we're the ones giving, not receiving care. When we realize that the only person who is probably going to take care of us is us, it still doesn't make it easy, but remembering that, our goals are to be able to continue to care for the people that we love so much and have likely sacrificed a lot for out of that love. To be able to continue to do that, we've got to take care of our own basic needs.
Love how you're Emphasis is both on personal responsibility and the need for support, where we're not meant to do this alone in either capacity. Before we wrap up, I'd love to make sure listeners know how they can go deeper with you and access your book. Where can listeners get their digital copy of Self-Care Isn't Selfish, The Compassionate Nurse, Step-by-Step Guide to Personal Stress Relief? And can you give them maybe one of your favorite chapters from the book?
My favorite chapter. I love what you're doing here because yes, it can be incredibly lonely being someone, especially someone who is a family caregiver. Like you said, so many people don't understand the challenges that you face when it comes to trying to do things that it's like, oh, well, yeah, go away for the weekend and that's not something that's super simple. And so you being here and really helping to normalize that for people. I mean, it's so important to not feel alone in situations. So thank you for the work you're doing. I would say, my favorite.
Every chapter, because you wrote them all.
Exactly. I think chapter 18, it's about just feeling it and not judging ourselves for the things that we're going through, for the times when maybe we feel resentment or frustration or hopeless. Those are normal things. And being able to just allow ourselves to feel both, mentally and in our body and the things that we feel without judging ourselves for that. And again, kind of coming back to that, what would you say to your best friend? If you had a friend that was going through some of the same things you were, and they were saying, sometimes I am just so tired. I don't know if I can keep going on. Like, I know I've got to, but sometimes I just don't feel like I can. And then I feel awful because I'm so thankful to have these people in my life, and it doesn't have to be one or the other. So just having that same kindness and grace with ourselves that we have with others. And that's so much easier said than done, but it also gets easier with practice. And I think with permission. And also in my book, there is a permission slip where, you can fill that in. I give myself permission to XYZ, and maybe that's to, take 3 breaths all by myself a day. Or maybe it's, something bigger than that. Sometimes we just feel like we can't. There's things that we just shouldn't do, that's not right. Really, we're adults. Just deciding within yourself, is this something that's going to be beneficial to me and not hurt other people? Then why wouldn't that be okay to do? And moving on to how people can get a copy of my book, and I've also got some other free resources on there. But if you just go to my website, you can go to Jenny Lytle. It's JennyLytle.com, and you can download a free copy of the book there. And if you can't remember my name, then you can also go to selfcareisn'tselfish.com. I've got different free resources on my website. If you're thinking a book seems like too much right now, then there's some shorter guides that you can work through. And my book is also available on Amazon, on Kindle, and audio book there on Audible, and also a large print hardback.
Fantastic. I was particularly piqued by it's on Audible because that's how I get my dose of adventure and information. Jenny, I wanted to thank you so much for the conversation that we've had today and for your way of honoring both the deep cost of caregiving and the small, real steps that can help us keep going on a day-to-day basis. Just to recap, today we've talked about the hidden cost of putting everyone else first and why self-care isn't selfish, how the becoming method helps busy caregivers build personalized stress relief, your 2 grounding questions for overwhelmed and simple under 5-minute practices that nurses and carers can begin from today. If you'd like to explore more about Jenny's work or get her free digital copy of Self-Care Isn't Selfish, you can head to selfcareisn'tselfish.com or her personalized website. I'll include all of her links in the show notes so that you can connect with her. If something in this episode has resonated with you, your only invitation is this. Choose one tiny act of care for yourself this week and give yourself permission to let it be enough for now. Jenny, I cannot thank you enough for being here and for everything you're doing for nurses and caregivers. To everyone listening, thank you for spending time with us today. Your care, your love, and your very real limits are all welcome here. I'm Michelle, and this is Radiant Moments. Until next time, take gentle care of your radiant moments and of yourself.